Sigil magic changed my life, mostly for the better. And by the end of this video, I will make sure that you can craft the perfect sigil statement, activate it, and be well on the way to manifesting the life of your dreams. And if that doesn't happen, you can watch the video again. Welcome to La Paz, the highest administrative capital in the world, for some reason. I mean, this is as good a place as any to talk about sigil magic. And let me tell you why I'm talking about it. If we haven't met before, my name is Gordon White, and I'm an author and podcaster and shamanic healer, and I convene the world's largest online magical training community at Rune. Before it was that community, and before it was a podcast, it was a blog. And gosh, however many years ago now, 11 or 12, I wrote a little blog post called Sigils Reboot, which changed the game somewhat for the practices of contemporary sigil magic in the West. And it came about for a bunch of reasons. I was living in London at the time and renting in a share house with flatmates, and it doesn't give you a lot of room for practical enchantment. And I kept getting made redundant at work. So I needed a form of high volume magic that could iterate and get me closer to goals like, I don't know, a small amount of money to be able to afford food, and so on. So I put this post together covering how it had been working for me from a sigil magic perspective. And it struck a chord. And that chord is still humming or resonating or whatever sound it is chords make when you pluck them. And it became the first course we did in the Rune Premium membership, the online magical training community. And it's been a cornerstone practice of one of my first books. And yeah, here we are, me talking about sigils as the guy who wrote this blog post based on some results, pretty good results he was getting, trying to transform his life from a particularly dire moment. And now look at me, quite literally the top of the world. This could be sigil magic for you. I don't really know. I'm here for other reasons, but it's a pretty backdrop. The altitude sickness is real, let me tell you. And let me tell you also why, or the other reason why I'm doing this video now. So in 2024, the listeners to the podcast, Rune Soup, decided, this is an idea I kind of came up with, that we would do one sigil a day, every day in 2024. Now I've been on a bit of a, as you can tell, travel tear the last few months. So mine's been a bit stop-start in the, so you know, I can bundle them usually into a week, sometimes 10 days, sometimes it's a day. But at the beginning of that, or this project, we did a live stream where we went over how to create a sigil from beginning to end. But actually, mostly what we focused on, and I'll have it linked up below because I still think it's probably the most important thing to do when it comes to sigil magic, is surfacing and formulating desire. One of the main challenges, I think, with being humans, maybe ever, but certainly at the moment, is the cross currents and not knowing what our true desires are versus what we're expected to want, all the rest of it, right? So you think you're getting into sigil magic because you want that raise at work. 3 months down the line, you're doing powerful transformational shadow engagement. You know, I'm warning you, it's a bigger practice than it looks from the outside. So anyway, in that video, we did the desire work. But in this one, I want to do kind of a companion piece. I want to do the technicals. So below, you will find the video that will help you. It's in the context of obviously setting like New Year's goals and intentions, but it can work for any time of the year. I want you to go and, if you haven't watched that one, go and check that one out in terms of giving you a steer on how to start surfacing your true desires and turning them into statements. Here, we're doing the technicals. Once you've got the desires, how to turn it into a sigil and how to activate that sigil. I opened some of the windows because even though we're high up, it's actually not as cold as you think it would be. And now it kind of smells of garbage in here, but we persevere. So I'm going to start the technicals in a really strange place, at least initially. I'm going to start the technicals with the history of sigil magic. Now, probably if you're watching this video, most of you know that sigil magic, as we understand it, began in the 1980s amongst the nascent bloom of chaos magic in England, Ray Sherwin, Peter J. Carroll, all that kind of stuff. And that's absolutely true. That's historical reality. But think about what you are doing when you make a sigil. You are allowing something to surface, which is your desire, from the imaginal or the unconscious. So whatever your desire is, and then whatever the imaginal unconscious is. And then you are applying some sort of in-world transformation to it. And then you are sending it back. Now that is one, very powerful, and two, very old. And when I say very old, I'm talking cave paintings and before. So the story of sigil magic is 1980s Thatcherite England, and it's also one of the first acts of magic humans have ever done. And the reason we start there on this longer timeline for technical reasons is sigil magic, the 1980s sigil magic, emerged from, I think, a theory of mind that is too small to contain it. And one of the things, if you've read some of my other books, like Ani.Mystic, or have been listening to the show, one of the things that, if not the thing, that is the great medicine of my life is the exploration and surfacing and sharing of what we might call animism. And animism has a very different theory of mind. And a shortcut to that, at least for the purposes of this video, is to declare to yourself that the imaginal and the spirit world are identical. Because when you sit with that statement, then this idea of a desire that emerges from wherever desire comes from, and that is philosophically profound. Like, we have wrestled with that particular angel since we've had philosophy. But all of a sudden, it's not just like, oh, it's a funny little thought in my head that I turn into a squiggle and then masturbate. It rhymes with some deeply ancient magic. So what I'm going to do now, because it's a YouTube video, I can read a quotation off my phone. I'm going to read to you from Aboriginal philosopher, author, and thought leader Tyson Yunkaporta's most recent book, Right Story, Wrong Story. And it's to do with the indigenous understanding of symbols, okay? So this is Tyson. In indigenous culture, symbols, patterns, and images are used to encode knowledge in supra-rational ways. Images that reference places and narrative can contain vast amounts of information that can be recalled by replication of the image or interacting with an object or place where the image is inscribed. So think there of the Wandjina paintings in Northwest Australia, for instance. The images are not usually literal codes for specific units of information, but are metaphors that recall larger sets of knowledge. They are not abstractions, though. They are entities in their own right, and the aunties caution us to use them with care. Now, let me be clear, if you're doing sigil magic, you're not doing Australian Aboriginal magic. I share that quote to demonstrate that anywhere, the Aymara people here in the Andes, anywhere else except the so-called West, post-Enlightenment, and more particularly post-Enlightenment materialism, has a much, frankly, better and more accurate frame of understanding for what a symbol is. And one of the things that I think overlaps there with sigil magic, from what Tyson just said, is the idea that the symbol is much, much bigger than what it appears, like from an information perspective, so that you interacting with the symbol will have outsized effects on your internal processes. And I'm just going to put that in there to say that that's what sigil magic is for me. And I mean that technically. One of the things you can do to absolutely transform your success is when you sit down to create your sigils and to activate them, to step into that lineage. I mean this technically, to understand that what you're doing is not just like a wacky, hey, fun thing to do. It's 1 million years old. It's 500,000 years old. It's 200,000 years old, depending on how old you think modern humans are. Or more specifically, how old you think hominins who can express human culture are. And that's technically important. It is technically important to step into the true antiquity and power of what it is you're doing. And part of that practice for me is almost a via negativa approach, which is to diminish literally the scientifically falsified and erroneous cosmovision or worldview that most of us grew up in. And I do that by a process of comparison, by doing my best to understand what cultures who have been less decimated by Enlightenment assumptions, how they think about mind and symbol and the imagination and desire. And it doesn't mean you're doing Aymara magic or Aboriginal magic. You are humbly learning what you can learn and stepping into your own expression. So genuinely, technical step one is to step into the true history of the sigil magic process. Step two, of course, is formulating the statement. So in between step one and step two, step 1.5, if you haven't watched it, is to go and check out the live stream where we talk about surfacing desire and finding different categories of things you might want, because we actually don't really know how to want in the West particularly well either. So step two, having done step 1 and 1.5, is formulating the statement. Now, there is, as I mentioned before, the Sigil Magic course in the members area, which will really elevate your game when it comes to actually turning what is surfaced from within you into a statement. But the simplicity of it is this, right? Present tense, don't use future or past tense, and don't use so-called negative words. So don't say, I am no longer sick. That's not a good, it's got no in it and it's got sick in it. Because, and you're going to turn those negative words into a symbol and put it back into your imaginal. Now, one of the reasonably good assumptions, can't prove otherwise, is that the unconscious is going to do its best to understand and respond to what it is that you actually want. That's the guess as to why it is when you send a sigil into your unconscious. It's like, all right, here you go. So if you mush up a word like no and sick and then send that in there, consider the difference to, instead of I am no longer sick, healed and happy life, or even better, healthy, happy life. Present tense, nice words. It's almost like, even if you get it partially wrong, because you are dealing with a process that quite literally crosses dimensions, in my understanding of it. So from the metaphoric to the literal, from the imaginal to the waking, is, and I learned this in the Amazon, is a dimensional crossing. So that is a imperfect process. And in imperfect processes, you want to be approximately good, so that you send a sigil in that says no and sick. Same thing like no more poverty or free from poverty. Don't send those words in there, because if you've done sigil magic before, even if you just kicked the tires on it, you know that it's wacky. You kind of know you're doing magic when you step into that trickster humor, reality, synchronicity of results. And so if you're playing this approximate game where it's like you send what you believe to be a clear statement into the unconscious, and then you get like approximately what you want back, but you understand once you've got it, like, that's why you did it that way. You want that imprecise process to be clustered around positive words, not negative words, because it is imprecise. So really, those are the two main guardrails to ensuring sigil statements can deliver what it is you want. Now, if you're doing a high volume, that's it, right? But if you are doing a high volume experimentation like Sigil a Day 2024, you can start including song lyrics, sacred scripts, sacred literature, inspirational quotes. Hang in there, kitty, whatever you want. But the guardrails for like good luck and don't fuck it up is present tense, so that you aren't intending for results to forever be in the future. And I'm using air quotes for obvious reasons, no negative words. There's no such thing as negative words, but we are dealing with a process that is, I don't want to say imperfect, it's perfectly imperfect, but it is imprecise from our experience of it here in this dimension, right? Those are your guardrails. Having stepped into the true antiquity of the process, having surfaced the desire, having turned that into a statement, now we come from turning that statement to an actual sigil itself. And frankly, this process is both easy and fun. You literally, I have a notebook for this, you literally write down with no spaces every single letter of your statement, and then you cross out all the repeating consonants, and you cross out every single vowel. And what I do then is I write the next line, so you have W, Y, Z, Q, whatever it ends up being on the next line, so that you have just consonants and no double ups. And at that point, and this is the point and it's delightful to watch when people finally get it. It's almost like watching people like kids learn to ride a bike for the first time, is you turn that sequence of letters into a sigil by beginning to smush them all together, and smush is the magical technical term for this, and from there, iterate until it looks pleasing to you. Now, people expect, this brings up sometimes unpleasant memories of art class in high school, where it's like, I can't do this, I can't draw, or I can't blah, blah, blah. You are embarking on a sacred process where you, which is God, is communicating to your unconscious, which is also God. When I tell you you can't fuck this up, you can't fuck this up. And frankly, the process when you step into that understanding becomes fun, but it becomes fun in the way, there was an English poet, his name escapes me, but he said, everyone, even though everyone's handwriting is disgusting, they like their own handwriting because it's like smelling your own farts. There's something to that energy when it comes to creating a sigil as an artistic expression. Like, you're allowed to laugh, especially at the beginning, when you've got to the end and you go, oh, this isn't being hung in any museum anytime soon. Now, how do you know? Because this is the next question I get. When you are done, like, you will literally know. So it usually, for me, it takes 2 iterations now. So I do the shmush and then maybe 3. That's not fair. It's not like it's always 2. Let's balance it out and say 2.5 per iteration. But you will know because you will all of a sudden, and this is the smelling the farts thing, kind of like what it looks like. Like, oh yeah, there will be a subtle change or a stirring in you when that sigil has turned into what it needs to turn into. And that's literally it. Part of getting good at sigil magic is trusting your own, don't love the word intuition, but trusting your own inner knowing, because it is God communicating with God here. Trusting your inner knowing that this is the symbol that's going to cross the dimensions, right? So my next step then, and this is, if you have the luxury of time, this is the best way of doing it. I tend to circle the one I like, and then I might flip the page and write the next sigil statement, turn that into a sigil. And I cut out, just from my notebook, so not on the nice paper, the one that I like the best. And so I have these cut out, let's just say 4 or 5 different cut out sigils, and I just park them somewhere in a drawer or on my altar or whatever for a day or 2 until I've forgotten, as best as possible, what each one is for. And it's at that process, and so you kind of, depending on if you're doing planetary magic and other planetary timings and other things that are useful force multipliers, which we cover in the course, but it's not necessary for beginners. Your beginners in magic just have miraculous powers. So if you are brand new to this, trust that magic, for whatever reason, gives you like a few free miracles at the beginning, probably just to like a drug dealer, like whet your appetite for it, and then you'll probably you will probably catch the hunger like the rest of us did. Anyway, I like to park them somewhere. And then when it comes time to, within an hour or so of actually performing the activation ceremony, then I use my trusty paint pens and black art paper, and I will transfer them onto little squares or rectangles or what have you of black art paper with a paint pen. Because, having just mentioned art class, one of the reasons that I guess my process of creating sigils has struck a chord, it turns out a lot of us weren't great in art class, and I'm here to celebrate and validate that in your journey, because it was in mine as well. And I'm genuinely happy with paint pen on art card. And I like black because I typically do these enchantments in the dark by candlelight and so on. You literally don't have to. I've also thrown them off the Hammersmith Bridge in the Thames. Like, I can't count the amount of places and times and whatever that I've used for sigil activation. But we're doing a basic 101 here. That's my process. So then you've gone over the course of several days from surfacing a desire to turning that into a statement to turning that in the lead up to your ceremony, turning that into the statements or the little sigils that you're going to activate. Now, I just said activate. Activation is the next step. And this is probably the third panic point for beginners, which is like, okay, cool. I think I've turned it into a statement that I don't hate. I think it looks kind of ugly or whatever. Like you'll get over that eventually. Then the next one is, now I have this squiggle. What do I do with it? Okay, I'm going to give a baseline activation now that literally anyone can do. And I mean literally anyone, because you're going to use the Lord's Prayer. Do you have to? Absolutely not. But the promise of this video is that you can go from beginning statement all the way to full activation. One of the other courses that I teach in the Rune Premium member area is what's called the Foundations course, the Foundations of Magic. And we actually explore in that course and in the prayer course the potency of the Lord's Prayer, where it came from. Because even if you aren't Christian, the story of the Lord's Prayer is this is God delivering a prayer of how to speak to God, right? Because it's based on words that Jesus spoke. So if you're a magician in the 3rd century in Alexandria, you recognize power when you see it. So it's an innocuous prayer. Well, it's very powerful, but it's a prayer that beginners to magic aren't going to freak out about. You don't have to use it. You can use whatever you want. So when you come to activate your sigils, make the area look nice. And this is general good practice for magic anyway. Unless you're going for, and this is its own vibe, like the 1990s overpass spray paint down by the train tracks. That's cool. That's a vibe. That's not what I'm talking about here. If you're doing this in your house, Jordan Peterson it, tidy your room, make sure it's clean. And then when it comes to setting the mood, it's like a date night for people who've been married for 30 years. Light a few candles, make it smell good. I like incense, and I like, unless it's a specific target or goal area, frankincense truly is the broad spectrum antibiotic of incense. Candles, frankincense. I like the half-light of candles for how I activate. So the Lord's Prayer, before you say it, so you've got your incense going, you've got your candles going, you close your eyes and you set an intention, again stepping into that idea that this is a prayer that was delivered by God to speak to God. So it's opening a loop. So you close your eyes and you set your intention that when you repeat this prayer out loud, it's going to, you can even say this, bless and sanctify this space, O Lord, for the practice of the holy work. Something like that. Or you can just set the intention that as you say this prayer, because this is what prayers do, you are altering the field in the environment around you to make it a bit sacred, to make it ready for what is a holy process. God speaking to God, God seeking to transform the cosmos through this conduit of desire that is God speaking to God, right? So that's the absolute baseline of opening ceremony. Now, you can skip this next step, but this I think is reasonably non-denominational, and it's how I do magic, which is much more in that cunning man curanderismo approach. But then you call upon your own saints, guides, angels, and highest powers. I call upon my own saints, guides, angels, and highest powers to sanctify this work with your presence. Guide me and aid me in the manifestation of my desires through this sigil activation ritual. You can just talk like I just did. You can just talk that bit however you want. But I call in my own saints, guides, angels, and highest powers. And that comes from a concept that premium members will understand, a spirit team. Everyone comes to this dimension as part of an X-Men team that is there to assist you in the process of whatever it is you come here to do. And those are the ones that I call upon in a sanctified space to help with the process. So there you are. For me, I have up in my wizard hut a coffee table that I will typically use to sit in front of, because my activation process is quite meditative. So you've done all that, you've called in your own spirit team, and then you just take a couple of deep breaths. I like to breathe in through the nose for about 4 and breathe out through the mouth for 8. This is a vagal breathing. And do that for about 4 or 5 breaths, just to slow down your own internal processes and open up. It's almost like setting an intention to open up your awareness, your noticing to what's going on around you. And then I pick up one by one each of my little sigils. And how I describe this is it's kind of like a magic eye puzzle. You look at it, and one of the reasons why I like in the dark, black card and let's say silver paint pen, is your sigil will start to warp as your eyes unfocus. Nothing crazy is happening, your eyes are unfocusing, right? But for me, it'll start to warp and you kind of unfocus your eyes and let it do that magic eye thing. And at some point in this process, because of how your eyes will kind of do a double vision thing, the sigil will disappear because your eye will kind of overlap black card on black card and the sigil will disappear. And usually for me, that's the key, that when my eyes refocus and the sigil returns, it no longer feels magical and alive. It feels like paint pen on paper. And I experience that as like, oh, it's gone in. It's gone in and down. It's on its way. And I put that card down and I move to the next one. And that's the process of, in sacred space, of how I activate sigils. Now, there will come a time, and I almost don't want to put this in this video because if you're new, you'll freak out and expect this each time you go to activate. Sometimes I will be holding a sigil and I'll be doing my magic eye painting process, and it'll still be alive. Like it won't, it will still squirm and it won't just turn back into card. And at that point, don't freak out, just put it down, move to the next one, and come back to it. And usually at that point, it'll work. I don't know why, because by then I've largely forgotten which one is which. And sometimes I wonder if is it because there's a sequence of, like a manifestation sequence cue in the imaginal or the unconscious, or is it just, there's just stuff going on in the unconscious by definition that you aren't conscious of, and you just got to roll with it. So that's what I do when one of the cards doesn't activate. And then at the end, when they've all just turned back into card sitting on your coffee table, you can skip this step, but I wouldn't. There's a final release. So you can say something like, does not matter, need not be. Or I release, this is probably a better one for beginners because that freaks people out. All outcomes are ultimately up to God. Or I release all outcomes to the Most High. But you need to do or say or feel something at the end of the activation process where it's like, does not matter, need not be. Because you're closing the desire channel from the conscious to the unconscious so that it can come back up from the unconscious to that one. So you need to somehow douse that energy here in this dimension so that it's called actually here in the Andes, it's called Amaru. That's the Aymara word for it. But like a turnaround energy. So people freak out about that because they've just gone through this whole process of, well, I need a job and a girlfriend and blah, 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 blah. And I've just like lit all these candles and the smoke alarm went off. And now you're telling me that does not matter, need not be? Yes. Yes, I am. Because how is wanting a girlfriend and a new car gone for you so far, right? That's not the process. The process is opening up communication between God and God in the infinite confidence and understanding of miracles. So you have to find your way to that feeling. And the first few times, it'll be a bit of a white knuckle. It'll be a bit of a, this doesn't sound right. It is. It's crazy, but it is. And that process is another kind of addition that Rune Soup has, I would say, added to sigil canon for the 21st century. And it's not something I came up with. It's from a deep reading, thanks to occult historian Mitch Horowitz of New Thought and people like Neville Godard, where that confidence, which some like the grandfather, if you will, of sigil magic back in early 20th century London, Austin Osman Spare, kind of knew, like he landed on it with his own experimentation and was activated with a less satisfactory theory of mind in the 1980s. What a rediscovery and reevaluation of American New Thought practices has surfaced is a surprising conservation of techniques across successful practices. So Neville Goddard's manifestation approaches have a 80% Venn overlap with sigil magic, which is frankly why they both work. And if you're not vibing on sigil magic, head in the New Thought direction, beginning with Mitch Horowitz and Neville Goddard. But I think the reason they both work is because they are based on some true things, if you will, about the metaphysics of being a human in a living cosmos. So at that point, the final thing to discuss is what to do with those pieces of card at the end. There is no optimization hack here at all. Some people think, oh, I shouldn't throw them out. Should I burn them? Should I bury them? Should I keep them? Should I keep them until what I desire manifests? I've tried all of that. I've tried putting them in graveyards that I have good relations with. I've tried burning them. One year, I kept every single sigil that I ever done, just kind of blue tagged. What I have found to be the right combination of lazy and maybe it does help is something that I wrote about in Sigils Reboot way back in the day, and I'll have that linked up below as well, of course, which is to put them somewhere, if you've got only about 4 or 5 on the go, to put them somewhere where you will half see them every day until you kind of forget about them and don't really notice they're there. So you can blue tack them to your mirror. I had them on the front door, on the door of the fridge, again, blue tacked, somewhere where you kind of see them but don't notice them. And then at some point in the medium future, between 1 and 3 months, you look at them and there'll just be a feeling of like, oh, these are really gone now. Like, these are just gone. And at that point, you absolutely can throw them out. You can just be like, in the bin. The one and the only things, and this is speaking as a permaculture designer, that I would say, and it doesn't affect the magic, except in that you want to be a good citizen of the cosmos, is art paper is delightful, but the process in making it requires a lot more bleach. And paint pens are also toxic chemicals. So if you are looking to leave yours in nature, consider a much more biodegradable option for creating them. And otherwise, don't just be like flinging them in your nearby woodland. You're not going to cause a huge amount of damage. And it is, funnily enough, because it is sacred work, the rules of pollution are different in the spirit world, but it's still not best practice. Best practice there, if you are going to, like, the forest isn't going to curse you, but you're not going to be as friendly as you could be. You know what I mean? Whereas if you want to do a nature release, consider a much more biodegradable process. And there's all kinds of wonderful options. You see why sigil magic gets bigger the more you sit with it. You may want to make your own paper. You may want to do, because you're kind of bringing your physical manifestation capacities as a human in a body in this moment to the whole process. And that will allow you full control over the ingredients that go in it so that you can leave them in places where it's not going to cause harm. That, don't get hung up on, but it is just, speaking as an animist and a permaculture designer, I would be remiss if when it came to disposal, I didn't say the sigils that I make have toxicity in them that I wouldn't put in my nearby woodlands just from general best practice. And also in my exact case, I have promised that I would not do things like that to my local place spirits. So that's the final bit to disposal, or what to do with them at the end of the ceremony. 1, don't freak out. I have been looking for over a decade now, and there does not appear to be any change in the likelihood of your manifestation or outcomes at that end of it. Like, you can't fuck it up at that point. You can leave them around, you can throw them out. At that point, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the results in any way, whichever one you use. So just sit with what's right for you. And the final piece to that is like, just try and be a good citizen. So there you have it, as promised, from beginning to end, how to craft a statement, how to turn that into a sigil, how to activate the sigil with a complete ceremony, and what to do afterward. Good luck with it. If you're interested in jumping on the Sigil a Day process, of course you can join whenever. Most of that discussion is happening in the Rune Telegram group, which is linked up below. If you want to know more about sigil magic and how to do it and other forms of magic in general, join the Rune Premium memberships, $12 a month. That's linked up below. Otherwise, good luck with it. This is an amazing and flexible framework, particularly for beginners with magic, that allows you to find the things that you really resonate with, the spirits you really resonate with, the processes, the timings. It is a glorious, powerful, but highly adaptable process of transformation if you let it be that. Good luck.